There's a strange power in the moments we often rush past, the stillness before dawn, the silence after a conversation, the long breath before we decide who we'll be next. These quiet spaces hold the real keys to transformation. Not because they're dramatic, but because they're honest. And in a world that pushes us to be louder, faster, more, there is something profoundly rebellious about simply being present, here, now, with what is. Why does the mind resist what is difficult? Why does it flinch from silence, shrink from challenge, and settle for the familiar even when the familiar is suffocating? The answer is not weakness, it is wiring. The mind, our most loyal protector, was not built for growth. It was built for survival. For thousands of years, its job has been to keep us away from danger, not to lead us into discomfort. And in a world where discomfort is often the doorway to meaning, this instinct becomes our greatest obstacle. But what if resistance isn't a warning sign to stop, but an invitation to evolve? Most of us were never taught how to engage with difficulty in a way that doesn't break us. We learned to either numb it or power through it. We suppress emotion or force action. We hustle to the next thing, hoping that if we just achieve enough, achieve fast enough, the ache of uncertainty will finally quiet. It doesn't, because growth doesn't come through bypassing discomfort. It comes through moving with it. To begin this kind of transformation, we must understand how the mind operates. The mind seeks patterns. It favors the known. And it avoids effort unless effort serves immediate survival. But growth is not immediate. It is slow, invisible at times, frustratingly nonlinear. It doesn't reward us instantly. It asks us to trust what we cannot yet see. And that kind of trust, the willingness to stay in the unknown, is where real strength is forged. That is where the idea of the silent edge is born. The silent edge is the space between reaction and response, between feeling and action. It is the subtle, sacred moment where you reclaim authorship over your life. You stop being a product of programming and begin to live as a person of presence. It begins small. You pause before sending the angry text. You notice the rising tension in your chest and breathe instead of bursting. You hear the voice that says you'll fail, and instead of obeying it, you get curious. What if we treated these moments not as struggles to survive, but as thresholds to cross? What if we didn't fear resistance, but followed it? Because resistance marks the edge of your current self. And everything beyond it, that future, wiser, more grounded version of you, is waiting just on the other side. To reach it, you don't need to force your mind. You need to retrain it. The mind is plastic, changeable. Through neuroplasticity, science has confirmed what philosophy has long intuited: the brain adapts to what it repeatedly practices. If you rehearse fear, your brain will become fluent in avoidance. If you rehearse courage, however small, your brain will learn to meet challenge with calm. You can rewire your relationship to difficulty, not by pretending it's not hard, but by deciding that hard things are not harmful, they're helpful, because they shape you. The discomfort you avoid is the very arena in which strength is built. Muscles tear to grow. Seeds break to root. Identities dissolve so that truth can emerge. This is why growth is not supposed to feel good. It is supposed to feel real. And real doesn't always mean pleasant. Sometimes it means raw. Sometimes it means you sit with your shame and refuse to run. Sometimes it means you revisit your fear and refuse to collapse. But each time you stay, you shift. You become a little less reactive, a little more resilient, a little more you. You start showing up in conversations differently. You respond with depth instead of defensiveness. You pause without withdrawing. You speak with clarity, not to dominate, but to connect. And that shift, small as it seems, is how emotional mastery begins. This is not self-help fluff. It's neuroscience. It's psychology. It's spirituality grounded in practice. Your brain will resist until it's retrained. Your body will flinch until it's reminded it is safe. Your ego will fight until it learns that peace is not a threat, it's your true state. And all of that begins, not in some future moment of perfect readiness, but now, in this breath, in this moment where you decide that growth is worth the discomfort it demands. So breathe, return, begin again. It begins, as all things do, with awareness. We cannot change what we do not first witness. And we cannot witness what we refuse to feel. That is why the most courageous act you will ever undertake is simply to stay, fully, fiercely, tenderly, with your own experience. Awareness is not passive observation. It is a fierce presence. It is the decision to stop running from your emotions and start getting curious about them. To stop silencing your anxiety with distraction. To stop numbing your sadness with productivity. To stop ignoring your anger and instead ask, what is it trying to protect? Because every emotion has a message. Not a command, but a signal. And the more we learn to listen, without judgment, without panic, the more those signals begin to guide us toward integration. This is the first principle of the silent edge. Nothing inside you is trying to hurt you. Your emotions, even the loudest ones, are just messengers of unmet needs. Even your reactivity is not rebellion, it's a form of protection. It's your mind saying, something here feels like danger. And instead of punishing that part of you, you begin to teach it. You teach it through presence. You teach it through repetition. You teach it through breath, space, and the sacred act of not abandoning yourself. The truth is, you cannot force your brain to do hard things by yelling at it. You can only lead it. And leadership, at its core, is not about dominance. It is about guidance. It is about offering safety, not suppression. Think of your mind like a child who has been scared one too many times. It doesn't need punishment. It needs presence. It needs to know that you're not going to disappear just because things got uncomfortable. It needs you to stay, and in staying, something remarkable happens. The fear begins to shift. Not because you've suppressed it, but because you've metabolized it. Like heat slowly softening metal, presence reshapes even the most rigid defenses. Your triggers start to transform from landmines into lessons. Your anger becomes a teacher of truth. Your procrastination becomes a signal of misalignment. Your guilt becomes a compass, pointing to where your values were violated, by you, or by someone else. And when you live with this level of awareness, your entire emotional landscape changes. You stop labeling emotions as good or bad. You begin to see them as loud or quiet, young or old, fresh or ancestral. You begin to trace their roots not just to the moment at hand, but to memories, patterns, and wounds that have long gone unspoken. You become a student of your own nervous system, and in doing so, you become less reactive, not because you feel less, but because you understand more. And that understanding, that intimacy with your inner world, becomes the foundation for every courageous choice you will ever make. Because courage isn't just the big, bold leap. Courage is also staying soft in a hard moment. Courage is choosing truth when it would be easier to pretend. Courage is walking back into the room and trying again. And courage is contagious. When you start living this way, grounded, real, steady, you give permission to others to do the same. You don't have to preach it. You don't have to persuade. You simply embody. You live from your center. And that living becomes your legacy. Let's be honest, this path is not glamorous. It's not always graceful. It's messy. You will stumble. You will regress. You will react. And that's okay. Because the point is not perfection. The point is presence. The point is returning again and again to the self who breathes beneath the chaos, to the self who is not defined by fear, to the self who can sit in stillness and hear the wisdom rising from within. And in that stillness, you begin to reclaim a new rhythm of being. You stop rushing. You stop performing. You stop asking, am I doing enough? And start asking, am I aligned with what matters? This rhythm is not about productivity. It's about congruence. Your thoughts, feelings, and actions begin to match. You begin to speak what you truly mean, not what you think others want to hear. You begin to rest, not as reward, but as ritual. You begin to create, not for approval, but for joy. This is not about becoming someone new. It is about becoming deeply, unapologetically who you have always been. It is about remembering, and in remembering, you begin to see that the power you've been seeking has never been somewhere out there. It has always been in your breath, in your body, in your ability to sit with discomfort without collapsing. This is your silent edge. It's not dramatic. It's not loud, but it changes everything, because it changes you. And when you change, not just what you do, but how you are, your entire world follows. Welcome to the revolution. Welcome to the return. Welcome home. We've been taught, subtly and overtly, that strength means never hesitating. That confidence is about always knowing, always moving, always achieving. But true strength has little to do with how quickly you act, and everything to do with how deeply you choose. The strongest people are not the fastest, they are the most present. They are the ones who pause before they speak, who listen longer than they are comfortable, who sit with the heat of discomfort and allow it to burn away what is no longer true. In a world obsessed with action, pausing is a revolution. To pause is not to procrastinate. It is to align. It is to make space for wisdom to rise. It is to honor that what you do matters. And therefore how you do it matters even more. The pause is where reaction is replaced by a response, where fear is softened by curiosity, where ego is quieted by clarity. And clarity, in this world, is radical, because we are bombarded every day with noise, notifications, headlines, advice, opinions, algorithms that seek to hijack our attention. In this storm of stimulation, your ability to center yourself becomes your greatest asset. Not just for productivity, but for peace. Peace is not the absence of problems. It is the presence of capacity. And you cultivate capacity by tending to your inner world with the same care you give to your outer goals. You build rituals, not just routines. You create environments that reflect your values, not just your ambition. You choose inputs, what you watch, read, listen to, that expand your consciousness rather than contract your spirit. And most of all, you guard your presence. You stop offering your attention to everything that demands it. You become discerning, not disconnected, clear, not cold. This inner environment shapes everything else. Because you don't rise to the level of your intentions, you fall to the level of your systems. And the system that matters most? Your inner one, your mental patterns, your emotional responses, your nervous system regulation. When your inner world is chaotic, no amount of external achievement feels satisfying. But when your inner world is anchored, even small victories become deeply fulfilling. This is what emotional mastery creates, not detachment, but depth. You begin to feel more, not less. But those feelings no longer rule you. They inform you. They refine you. And the more refined your emotional awareness, the more effective your external action becomes. This is not self-indulgent. It's strategic. It's spiritual. It's sustainable, because burnout is not a badge of honor. It is a signal that you've been operating from disconnection. Disconnection from your limits. Disconnection from your values. Disconnection from your truth. When you reconnect, when you remember that your worth is not measured by your output, that your pace does not define your value, you begin to make decisions from integrity, not urgency. You stop chasing timelines that aren't yours. You stop measuring your life in comparison to others. You begin to listen to a quieter, wiser voice within, the one that knows when to act and when to rest, when to speak and when to stay silent, when to persist and when to surrender. And surrender is not giving up. It is letting go of what you cannot control so you can focus fully on what you can. It is the choice to stop forcing what doesn't fit and start trusting the rhythm of your own becoming. This rhythm is often slower than you want, but it is always wiser, because becoming is not about acceleration. It's about alignment. When you're aligned, time expands. You get more done with less strain. You connect more deeply with less effort. You live more fully with less fear. And that fullness, it's not found in perfection. It's found in presence, in how you show up for the people you love, in how you meet yourself in the mirror, in how you respond to life, not as a victim of circumstance, but as a conscious participant in your own becoming. This is what it means to lead yourself. And self-leadership is the foundation of all other leadership, because no title, role, or recognition can replace the inner authority of someone who knows who they are and chooses to live accordingly. You become magnetic not because you're trying to be, but because you're free. Free from pretending, free from performing, free from the prison of should. And that freedom is your power, not power over others. Power with yourself. And from that power, you build a life, not just one that looks good, but one that feels like home. This is the quiet work, the deep work, the real work. And it starts with the next breath, the next moment, the next choice to return, and return again. There is a hidden wisdom in the way life unfolds, messy, unpredictable, and often out of sync with our plans. But if you learn to observe carefully, you begin to notice that the moments you thought were delays were really preparation. The setbacks were setups. The detours were disguised redirections towards something more aligned. What we often call resistance is not life working against us, it's life working on us. To shift how we relate to resistance is to transform how we walk through everything. Because resistance is not just what we feel when facing a task we dread. Resistance is also what we feel when we are nearing something meaningful, something that will change how we see ourselves. And change, even when welcome, can be terrifying. The mind clings to what is known. It prefers certainty over truth, familiarity over freedom. And this is where the inner battle begins, not between right and wrong, but between comfort and calling. Your calling will always stretch you. It will ask you to leave behind identities that once kept you safe. It will invite you into spaces where your voice shakes. It will expose your doubts and demand your presence anyway. But it will also show you what you're made of. It will reveal the strength you forgot you had. It will awaken clarity you didn't know you were capable of. It will remind you that safety is not found in staying the same, it is found in staying true. To be true to yourself is to walk a path that few applaud but many benefit from. Because when you are in alignment, your very existence becomes an offering. You no longer need to convince or convert, you simply become. You become the parent who listens before reacting, the leader who serves before demanding, the friend who holds space without fixing, the creator who shares without needing validation. And this becoming, it's not a single act. It's a practice. A daily devotion to who you want to be when no one is watching, when no one is clapping, when no one understands. Because the deepest transformation doesn't happen in the spotlight. It happens in the solitude of your own integrity. When you choose to show up anyway, when you follow through on your word, when you act in ways that make your future self proud. It's easy to speak of values. It's harder to live them when no one is looking. But that's where the real work happens. That's where legacy is built, not in one grand moment, but in 1,000 quiet ones. And your mind? It will test you. It will whisper, "Who do you think you are?" It will say, "This is too much." It will ask, "What if they reject you?" But underneath that voice is another, softer, older, wiser. It says, "Keep going." It says, "You are not alone." It says, "This is how you rise." And you will rise, not in a straight line, not with perfect grace, but with honest steps, with broken open moments, with messy truths and clear intentions. You will rise with your scars, not in spite of them. You will rise because you learned to stay, to breathe, to pause, to listen to what was real even when it was hard. That is resilience, not bouncing back, but rising differently, rising with new eyes, rising with a deeper connection to what matters. You begin to define success differently, less about achievement, more about authenticity, less about speed, more about sustainability, less about applause, more about alignment. And when alignment becomes your goal, life feels different. You stop forcing things to fit. You stop proving your worth. You stop betraying your intuition just to be accepted. You begin living a life that feels like truth in motion. And this truth, it's not loud. It doesn't need to be, because it carries weight. The kind of weight that grounds you. The kind of weight that steadies those around you. The kind of weight that says, "I know who I am." This is the power of quiet clarity. It doesn't fight for space. It creates space. It doesn't compete. It contributes. It doesn't perform. It radiates. And the source of that radiance? It's presence. Presence with your pain. Presence with your joy. Presence with the tension of not knowing and the freedom of choosing anyway. That presence is your practice. It is the thread that weaves all the parts of you together. And the more you practice it, the less you need the world to validate who you are, because you already know, you already are, you are already becoming. Even now, you don't need a dramatic awakening to begin your transformation. Sometimes, all it takes is a moment of honest reckoning, the kind that doesn't show up on a timeline or in a journal entry, but in your breath, your posture, your choice to do the next thing with a little more presence. This is the quiet revolution, not the firework, but the flame, not the roar, but the rhythm. And when you begin to live from this place of rhythm, not rush, you realize just how much of your suffering was born not from life itself, but from the way you resisted its flow. You resisted slowing down. You resisted saying no. You resisted resting, grieving, being seen. You resisted silence, because silence made you feel what you've been avoiding. But the truth is, silence doesn't create discomfort. It reveals it. And that revelation, as raw as it feels, is sacred, because you cannot heal what you refuse to see. You cannot grow beyond what you refuse to feel. You cannot lead others somewhere you've never dared to go within yourself. So you stop running. You stop spinning. You sit. You breathe. You let the egg speak. You let the fear show its face. You let the hope rise without apology. And when you do, something shifts, not outside, but within. You begin to realize that emotional control isn't about suppression. It's about permission. It's not about pretending you don't feel. It's about allowing your feelings to move through you without taking over you. Like clouds in the sky, they pass. They shift. They never last. But the sky remains. You are the sky. Your essence is vast, resilient, undisturbed by the weather of your experience. And the more you anchor into that truth, the more peace you carry, not because life gets easier, but because you get clearer. Clarity doesn't mean certainty. It means you stop abandoning yourself every time doubt arises. It means you stay, even when you want to disappear. It means you keep your heart open, even when it would be safer to shut it. And that kind of openness, it's revolutionary, because we live in a world that rewards armor, that says toughness is the same as strength, that celebrates resilience while ignoring the softness it comes from. But true resilience, it's born of softness. It's born of knowing that your tenderness is not a liability, it is your compass. When you can cry without shame, pause without guilt, speak without rage, you are powerful. When you can feel the full weight of your experience and still choose to respond with grace, you are free. This is not weakness. It is wisdom. And this wisdom is not taught in books or conferences. It's learned in the trenches, in the tension, in the 2 a.m. moments when your thoughts are louder than your logic, in the moments you choose to breathe instead of break. And every time you choose that, every time you choose not to react, not to abandon yourself, not to collapse, you are practicing emotional integrity. You are becoming someone who leads from their center, someone who doesn't just cope, but creates, someone who doesn't just survive, but expands. And expansion doesn't mean more. Sometimes it means less noise, less need for control, less urgency to be anything other than who you are right now, because who you are is enough. You don't have to earn peace. You only need to stop fighting yourself long enough to feel it. You don't have to manufacture meaning, you only need to sit still long enough for it to emerge. You don't have to prove your worth, you only need to stop forgetting it. And this remembering, it's your return. Return to breath, return to body, return to balance, return to the edge that is not loud, but unshakable, the edge that meets life with curiosity, that moves with grace under pressure, that responds instead of reacts, that doesn't rise to prove, but stands to serve. This is not theory. This is practice. It's the slow shaping of a life that feels like truth, not all the time, not without failure, but enough to know you're on the right path. And the right path, it's not perfect. It's yours, marked by pause, rooted in presence, carried by choice. And when you choose again and again to live from this place, you become something rare, someone who is not addicted to urgency, someone who doesn't need to be loud to be clear, someone who is no longer ruled by the world, but moved by meaning. That's what the silent edge really is. It's you, fully awake, fully here, fully you. You don't need to control everything to be free. You just need to stop letting what you can't control you. There is profound liberation in this idea, not the kind that explodes with fireworks, but the kind that slowly unshackles you from the invisible chains of constant tension, of always needing to know, of always needing to manage the outcome. We are a culture obsessed with prediction. We believe if we can just anticipate every twist, we'll avoid pain. But in reality, pain does not come from the unexpected, it comes from the refusal to adapt when the unexpected arrives. Control, as most people live it, is an illusion. And worse, it's a burden. It's the weight you carry when you believe your worth depends on managing the unmanageable. But life was never meant to be managed. It was meant to be met with presence, met with curiosity, met with courage. That's what emotional freedom is, not the absence of emotion, but the ability to face any emotion without being consumed by it. And the path to that freedom isn't avoidance, it's capacity. The capacity to feel, stay, breathe, and still choose a response that aligns with your truth. You begin to build this capacity in small moments. You feel irritation rise and pause instead of lashing out. You notice fear and take one small step forward anyway. You sit with uncertainty and refuse to numb it with distraction. These moments matter. They're not small. they're seismic. Because every time you stay instead of flee, respond instead of react, breathe instead of break, you're expanding your emotional threshold. You're teaching your nervous system that it is safe to feel, that it is safe to be. And slowly, what once overwhelmed you becomes manageable. Not because life has changed, but because you have. This is how you become the kind of person who can lead under pressure, love without control, create without fear of judgment. Because your inner world is no longer dictated by external noise. It is held by inner clarity. Clarity, like any form of strength, must be cultivated. It doesn't arrive by accident. It arrives through intention, through practices that deepen your awareness and refine your discernment, through silence, through solitude, through honest reflection on what is no longer serving you, and the courage to let it go. Letting go is not a loss. It's a release. It's choosing what to carry. It's choosing what stories get to shape you, and which ones must be rewritten. Because your story is not fixed. You are not the sum of your past. You are the author of what comes next. And your pen is made of presence. That's the paradox. You shape the future not by obsessing over it, but by fully inhabiting now. Not later, not when things settle down. Now. When you begin living this way, something shifts. You stop outsourcing your peace to circumstance. You stop waiting for clarity to arrive before you act. You begin acting in alignment with what you already know. And what you know, deep in your bones, is this: you are not here to be perfect. You are here to be real. You are not here to perform. You are here to participate. You are not here to impress. You are here to impact. Impact happens not when you force your truth on others, but when you live it so fully that others feel permission to live theirs. That is what presence does. It frees. Presence says, you don't have to be anything but here. You don't have to fix this moment. You just have to meet it. And meeting it means softening your grip. It means trusting your inner knowing more than external approval. It means slowing down enough to hear the voice underneath the noise. That voice? It's been speaking all along. It's the whisper that says you were made for this even when you feel afraid. It's the hum beneath your fear that says keep going. It's the stillness at the center of your storm that says breathe. And that voice is not asking for perfection. It's asking for presence. Because presence is power. And the more you live from that power, the more your life becomes a reflection of what matters, not what's urgent, not what's popular, not what's expected, but what's real. What's real may not always be easy, but it will always be enough. It will be enough to center you when everything spins, enough to guide you when the path is unclear, enough to anchor you when the world feels unsteady. And the more you return to that center, the more you realize you don't need to force your way forward. You can flow. You can move with life instead of against it. Not because life is always kind, but because you are. Not because the path is always easy, but because you're committed. Not because you've figured it all out, but because you've stopped abandoning yourself. And that is the turning point. When you stop abandoning yourself, you stop needing others to rescue you. You stop waiting for the world to understand you. You start leading yourself. Quietly, consistently, powerfully. You start becoming the version of you that doesn't need permission to rise. You just rise. It's easy to forget, in the midst of pressure and pursuit, that your value is not tied to your velocity. You do not become more worthy because you move faster. You do not become more lovable because you produce more. And yet, we live in a world that equates speed with significance. Slow down. And people wonder what's wrong. Rest. And they call you lazy. Reflect. And they say you're behind. But behind what? Behind a standard built on burnout. Behind a system that rewards disconnection. Behind a culture that profits off your insecurity. You are not behind. You are exactly where you need to be to hear what life has been trying to teach you all along. Slowness is not stagnation. It is sacred. It is in the slowness that you begin to notice the nuance, the subtle shifts in your thoughts, the quiet cravings of your soul, the tension that tightens when you say yes but mean no. When you slow down, you begin to reclaim your life from autopilot. You stop rushing through your mornings, your meals, your relationships. You start tasting life again, touching it, breathing it in. You realize that mindfulness isn't just meditation on a cushion, it's the moment you look your loved one in the eye and actually see them. It's the pause before you respond to an email that would have triggered you yesterday. It's the breath you take before making a choice you can't undo. These moments, small, quiet, unseen, are where transformation takes root. Because transformation doesn't happen when you change everything. It happens when you change your relationship to everything. You begin to see that presence is not something you earn once and hold forever. It's something you return to, moment by moment, breath by breath. And sometimes, that return means grieving the parts of you that can't come with you into this next chapter. The people pleaser who learned to shrink to feel safe. The perfectionist who clung to control to feel worthy. The overachiever who mistook busyness for belonging. You don't abandon these parts, you thank them. They helped you survive. But survival is not your ceiling. You are here to live, and to live fully. You must shed what is no longer true. This shedding is not a failure, it's a renewal. Just as snakes shed their skin to grow, just as trees release their leaves to bloom again, you too are allowed to let go. Let go of stories that were never yours. Let go of roles you were assigned but never aligned with. Let go of timelines that turn your life into a race instead of a revelation. This is not giving up. It is giving in, to truth, to rhythm, to self, and self, as it turns out, is not a fixed identity. It is an evolving awareness. It is the space between who you were and who you're becoming. It is the permission to change your mind, to course correct, to evolve publicly and privately. In that evolution, something incredible happens. You stop craving approval. You start creating from authenticity. You no longer need the world to understand you. You understand yourself. And self-understanding is the birthplace of compassion. Because the more intimately you meet your own fear, the more gently you meet it in others. The more honestly you name your shame, the more freely you hold space for someone else's. The more often you return to your center, the less reactive you become to everyone else's chaos. You become the calm in the room. Not because you never feel the storm, but because you've made peace with your own weather. And that peace, it ripples into your relationships, into your work, into the way you walk into a room and shift the energy, not by commanding it, but by anchoring it. You don't need to raise your voice to be heard. You don't need to harden to be respected. You don't need to prove anything to be impactful. You only need to be here, fully, honestly, courageously. This is what the silent edge cultivates. It's not a formula. It's not a hack. It's a way of being. One that is rooted in awareness, embodied in practice, and refined through presence. Presence that makes space. Presence that breathes first. Presence that chooses to listen when others rush to speak. Presence that remembers, there is wisdom in the pause, power in restraint, depth in the slow unfolding of truth. This depth is rare in a world addicted to surface. And so, your presence becomes a gift, not just to you, but to everyone around you. Because when you live this way, you teach by being. You remind others that it is safe to feel, safe to rest, safe to rethink, safe to change. You don't just speak of integrity, you embody it. You don't just talk about awareness, you live it. You don't just wish for peace, you carry it. And in doing so, you don't just change your life, You expand what's possible for every life you touch. That's the kind of legacy no title can offer. That's the kind of freedom no external success can replace. That's the kind of power no one can give you, because it's already yours. The only question is, will you return to it? And will you stay? Let us go deeper. Let us ask what happens when you've built presence, practiced stillness, trained your emotional muscle, and then life hits you anyway. The truth is, mastery does not protect you from hardship. It prepares you for it. Being grounded doesn't mean storms won't come. It means you're less likely to be uprooted when they do, because challenges don't care about your practices. Life does not pause when you're tired. Fear doesn't wait until you're ready. It arrives. Unexpected, unapologetic, unfair, and still. You rise, not because rising is easy, but because rising is who you are now. This is the moment your inner work is tested, not by theory, but by tension. When the disappointment cuts steep, when the delay is long, when the door closes for no good reason, and everything in you wants to retreat, collapse, numb out. But something else within you whispers, stay open, stay soft, stay true, even when you don't understand, even when it hurts. Especially then, because now you know, pain is not the opposite of peace, it's the invitation into it. This is the paradox at the heart of emotional mastery. Peace is not found by avoiding difficulty. It is found by moving through it with clarity, compassion, and courage. You begin to see your reactions as windows, not walls. You notice where you still carry unmet needs, where old wounds still shape your choices, where fear still disguises itself as logic. And this noticing is not judgment. It is grace. It is the profound recognition that being human means you will forget, and becoming whole means you will remember. Again and again, you remember that your worth is not in what you achieve but in who you choose to be when achievement is stripped away. You remember that your strength is not in your ability to endure alone, but in your willingness to ask for help without shame. You remember that vulnerability is not a liability. It is the birthplace of all connection, all innovation, all healing. You remember that being open doesn't make you weak. It makes you real. And realness? It is rare. It is radiant. It is resilient. Because when you are real, you stop leaking energy trying to be someone else. You stop filtering your truth to fit in. You stop performing for approval and begin living in alignment. And alignment feels like freedom. Freedom from the roles you were never meant to play. Freedom from the masks you were taught to wear. Freedom from the cycles that kept you chasing peace instead of embodying it. And when you embody peace, everything changes. You make different decisions, not from pressure, but from presence. You draw different boundaries, not from fear, but from clarity. You love differently, not from need, but from overflow. And this overflow, it becomes your impact. Because when you are full, not with ego, but with essence, you pour naturally. You speak with sincerity. You act with integrity. You show up with consistency. And people notice. Not because you're trying to impress, but because you're impossible to ignore when you're anchored in truth. You don't have to be loud to lead. You just have to be real. And realness, when practiced daily, becomes a quiet force. It moves things. It shifts rooms. It inspires change, not by demanding it, but by demonstrating it. This is why your inner work matters, not just for you, but for the world around you. Because every time you choose stillness over snapping, every time you choose clarity over chaos, every time you choose love over pride, you shift the atmosphere. You heal patterns. You disrupt cycles. You expand what's possible. This is legacy, not what you build, but who you become. And who you become shapes everything you touch. So when life feels overwhelming, when the path feels unclear, When progress feels slow, remember, you are not behind. You are becoming, and becoming takes time. It is not always visible. It is not always celebrated. It is not always graceful, but it is always worth it, because each time you return to presence, you reclaim your power. Each time you pause, you plant a new possibility. Each time you speak truth, you stretch the soul of the world, and in doing so, you are not just surviving, you are creating a new way forward, a way marked by integrity, not image, a way anchored in being, not doing, a way powered by love, not fear. And that way, it starts here, with one breath, one pause, one choice to stay present when it would be easier to perform. That is the work. That is the practice. That is the path of the silent edge. There will come a time in your journey where everything slows, not by choice, but by necessity. Progress feels distant. Clarity feels elusive. You wake up wondering where the fire went. What once felt vibrant now feels muted. Your purpose hasn't left, but your energy has. And this is the season of still becoming. It's not the breakdown. It's not the breakthrough. It's the in-between. The quiet hallway between chapters. The holy hush before the next yes. Most people rush through this space. They reach for the next distraction, the next goal, the next hit of validation. Because waiting feels like weakness. Rest feels like retreat. Slowness feels like failure. But this space is sacred. And if you can stay just a little longer, you will discover that this in-between is not an interruption of your path. It is your path. It is where the roots go deep. It is where old identities unravel. It is where silence becomes symphony. Because healing is not always loud. Growth is not always visible. Becoming is not always linear. Sometimes the most radical transformation is simply staying with what is, without trying to fix it, rush it, or escape it. So if you're here now, pausing, aching, waiting, know this: you are not stuck. You are integrating. You are not broken. You are building. You are not lost. You are being led deeper into yourself. And what waits on the other side of this stillness is not a better version of you, but a truer one. A version of you that no longer needs to pretend. A version that no longer performs peace, but lives it. A version that can walk into any room without shrinking. Without shouting, just shining. But first, you rest. You rest to remember. You rest to restore. You rest because rest is not what you earn after you've proved your worth. It is what you choose because you are already worthy. This is the radical act in a world obsessed with hustle, to stop and trust that you are enough, even when you're not doing. And as you rest, the world will try to seduce you back into urgency. It will whisper lies about laziness, weakness, irrelevance. But you will know better. You will know that silence is where strength is reborn. That stillness is not the absence of movement, it's the presence of meaning. That waiting is not wasting, it is weaving. It is here, in this sacred pause, that you begin to rewrite your relationship with time. You stop treating time as a taskmaster and start relating to it as a teacher. You learn that urgency is rarely rooted in clarity. Most of the time, it's rooted in fear, fear of missing out, of being forgotten, of not being good enough. But when you trust your timing, you no longer need to outrun your worth. You no longer need to chase what's already aligned. You begin to move, not faster, but truer. And this truth becomes your compass. It helps you say no to what no longer fits. It helps you say yes to what once scared you. It helps you sit through discomfort long enough to find the diamond buried in the dirt. Because discomfort, when met with awareness, becomes initiation. It initiates you into the next layer of your power. The power that doesn't roar, but radiates. The power that doesn't dominate, but disrupts, gently, firmly, unshakably. You become the kind of person who doesn't need to control the room to command respect, who doesn't need to defend themselves to be fully themselves, who doesn't need to prove their right to know their worth. And that kind of person? They are magnetic, not because they seek attention, but because they're anchored in intention. Not because they have all the answers, but because they ask the right questions. Not because they're perfect, but because they're present. And presence, practiced long enough, becomes power. Not over others, but within yourself. The power to be where you are, as you are, with what is. That kind of presence can't be faked. It can't be hacked. It can't be fast-tracked. It's earned, through the hours you stayed when it was easier to run, through the moments you breathed when it was easier to blame, through the days you returned to yourself, again and again, even when no one else noticed. This is the quiet glory. This is the slow revolution. And this is the gift you give, not just to yourself, but to everyone around you, because a grounded soul gives others permission to land. A rested heart gives others permission to soften. A quiet mind gives others permission to think clearly. You become the mirror people didn't know they needed, not to see themselves, but to remember who they've always been. You don't teach this, you embody it. And embodiment, real, rooted, relational, is the greatest offering you will ever give. So let this be your reminder, you are not falling behind. You are rising in a way the world has forgotten how to measure. Don't rush, don't shrink, don't doubt the beauty of your becoming. You are not what you do, you are how you be. And how you be, when done with grace, presence, and compassion, changes everything. There is a version of you the world has not yet met. Not because you're hiding it, but because you're still becoming it. This version doesn't live in the past you've outgrown, nor in the future you keep chasing. It lives in the quiet choices you make every day, in the breath you take before reacting, in the pause between intention and action, in the decision to return to presence, again and again, when distraction seduces. This becoming is not linear. It is layered, cyclical, messy, miraculous, and it asks something simple, yet sacred, that you stop trying to be impressive, and start being true. Because impressive changes with the weather, but true, that lasts. Your truth may not be popular, it may not be palatable, it may not fit the mold you once worked so hard to shape, but your truth will set you free, not in an instant, but over time. Not by force, but by fidelity. Not as a moment, but as a movement. The movement back to wholeness. Wholeness is not perfection. It is integration. It is the courage to stop compartmentalizing your soul to fit into systems that were never built to hold it. It is the audacity to bring all of you to the table, your softness and your strength, your shadows and your shine, your doubts and your dreams, and to no longer apologize for any of it. But this wholeness, it takes practice. It takes boundaries. It takes the willingness to be misunderstood, because some people won't recognize you when you stop performing. They've gotten used to the version of you that says yes too fast, laughs too hard, dims too quickly. The version that sacrifices authenticity for acceptance. The version that keeps peace externally while creating war internally. And when you stop being that version, you will be met with resistance, not just from others, but from yourself. You will miss the comfort of old patterns. You will crave the predictability of your pain. You will question whether this path of truth is worth the cost. But stay the course, because what's waiting on the other side of that resistance is not just freedom, it's you. The you who trusts herself enough to speak without shrinking. The you who loves himself enough to rest without guilt. The you who honors their boundaries, not to push people away, but to protect what is sacred. This you is not a fantasy. It's a choice. And every day, You get to choose again. You get to choose silence over spiraling, presence over performance, compassion over comparison. You get to choose the path of slow power, the kind that does not shout, but transforms. The kind that doesn't dominate, but deepens. The kind that shifts the entire room without needing to take up all the space. And when you live this way, anchored, honest, awake, you become someone people trust. Not because you're perfect, but because you're real. And in a world full of curated personas, realness is radical. Realness says, I'm still learning. Realness says, I made a mistake and I'm still worthy. Realness says, I don't have all the answers, but I'm still showing up. This is how trust is built, not through certainty, but through sincerity. And trust, once built, becomes the bridge across every divide. It heals relationships. It rebuilds broken systems. It reminds people of their humanity. So don't underestimate the impact of your inner work. Don't minimize the power of your presence. Don't dismiss the miracle of your becoming, because the world doesn't need more noise. It needs more people who can sit in the silence and still know who they are. More people who can hold discomfort without running. More people who can disagree without disconnecting. More people who are not swayed by trends, but anchored in truth. That's what you're building here, not just a better life, but a different legacy. A legacy where emotional integrity matters more than optics, where presence matters more than productivity, where alignment matters more than appearance. You're rewriting the rules, and in doing so, you're giving others permission to question the ones they inherited. You're not just leading yourself, you're lighting a path. And this path is not easy. It is narrow. It is sacred. It is yours. So keep going. Keep coming home to the self that lives beneath your roles. Keep choosing softness in a world that rewards steel. Keep tending to the places that ache. Not because they are broken, but because they are calling for your attention. That is the edge. That is the revolution. That is you, fully here. Fully human. Fully alive. There is a moment in every journey where the noise quiets, not because the world stops, but because you've stopped giving it permission to drown you out. You start hearing yourself again, not the self layered with expectation, pressure, and performance, but the self that has been whispering beneath it all along. The self who remembers not just who you are, but why you are. And that why, it changes everything. Because once you know why you're here, you no longer settle for half-lived moments. You stop measuring your life by how busy you are and start measuring it by how alive you feel. You stop chasing significance and start embodying it. This is the essence of the silent edge, not performance, but presence, not force, but flow, not reaction, but alignment. To walk this edge is to live intentionally. It is to no longer be seduced by urgency, to no longer allow distraction to dictate your direction, to no longer outsource your self-worth to anyone who cannot hold the weight of it. And you learn, slowly but profoundly, that not everyone can. Some people will love the version of you that made them comfortable, that stayed quiet, agreeable, easy. The version of you that stayed small enough to not confront their own fear. But as you grow, you begin to see clearly, not everyone is meant to go with you. This isn't judgment. It's clarity. The kind of clarity that allows you to bless others on their journey, even when it no longer aligns with yours. Because growth isn't just about expansion. It's about refinement. Refining your voice, refining your values, refining your vision until it is so clear, so true, so undeniably yours that nothing outside of you can distort it. This is the power of a centered soul. You become unshakable not because life stops shaking, but because you've learned how to stay rooted when it does. You've built habits not just of discipline, but of devotion. You've practiced presence not as a performance, But as a lifestyle, you've stopped waiting for the world to affirm your path and started walking it with quiet confidence. And that quiet confidence? It speaks louder than any volume ever could. It shows up in how you begin your mornings, with intention. Not impulse, in how you speak, with clarity. Not control, in how you lead, with love. Not ego, in how you rest, with trust. Not guilt, because now you know, rest is part of the rhythm. Silence is part of the strength. Stillness is part of the strategy. You are no longer at war with yourself. No longer hustling for your own attention. No longer betraying your needs for others' comfort. You've stopped chasing alignment and started living it. And alignment, true alignment, requires awareness. It requires that you look at your life with honest eyes and ask, where am I shrinking? Where am I settling? Where am I saying yes when my soul is screaming no? These questions are uncomfortable. But they are the doorway to liberation, because every misalignment is an invitation, not to punish yourself, but to realign, to recenter, to reclaim what is yours, your time, your truth, your tenderness. Yes, even your tenderness, because tenderness is not weakness. It is your superpower. It is what keeps you human in a world trying to make you hard. It is what allows you to feel deeply without falling apart. To hold space without fixing. To offer love without losing yourself. This is leadership, not just of others, but of self. And self-leadership is the foundation of every meaningful movement. Every healed relationship. Every sustainable success. It is the root from which all else grows. And the deeper your roots, the wider your reach. Because those who are rooted in truth don't just rise. They lift. They don't just influence. They inspire. They don't just survive. They shape what comes next. That's the invitation of the silent edge. Not to be more, but to be you, fully, fiercely, faithfully, to speak only when it serves, to move only when it's aligned, to rest as a sacred act, to live not just from the head, but from the heart and the gut and the soul, and in doing so, to become something rare, not perfect, not polished, but whole, wholly alive, wholly present, wholly yourself. And that, more than anything else, is what the world is starving for. Not more noise, more realness, not more striving, more groundedness, not more gurus, more humans. So if you've ever felt too quiet to matter, too different to belong, too tender to thrive, this is your reminder. Your presence is your power, your softness is your strength, your quiet is your contribution. You are not here to conform. You are here to call things back to truth. And every time you choose integrity over image, depth over dominance, love over fear, you are doing holy work. You are expanding what's possible. You are not late. You are not lost. You are not behind. You are exactly where your soul knew you'd need to be, learning what only this moment could teach. So breathe. Trust. Keep going. The edge is not the end. It's the beginning of everything real. At some point in your journey, you realize the greatest victory is not proving others wrong, but proving to yourself that you were never broken in the first place. You realize that healing is not about returning to who you were before the hurt, but about becoming someone wiser, softer, and stronger because of it. You realize that presence is not the opposite of progress. It is the foundation of it. And from that foundation, you begin to rebuild, not just habits or routines, but identity. You start asking better questions. Not what should I do, but who do I want to be while doing it? Not how do I get more, but what do I already have that I've overlooked? You realize you've been taught to seek answers outside of yourself. From books, from systems, from influencers and experts. But the most transformative answers have always lived inside you, beneath the noise, beneath the fear, beneath the false urgency. And to access them, You don't need to try harder. You need to listen deeper, because your life speaks. It speaks in patterns. It speaks in nudges. It speaks in discomfort that doesn't go away. And dreams that refuse to die. The question is not whether life is speaking. The question is, are you listening? Listening not to react, but to receive. Not to fix, but to feel. Not to plan your next move, but to fully inhabit this one. That's where wisdom lies, not in knowing more, but in noticing more. You begin to notice when your energy contracts and when it expands. When you feel drained and when you feel alive. When you're pretending and when you're truly present. And the more you notice, the more you align, not with who you think you should be, but with who you already are when you're not trying to be anyone else. That version of you, the grounded, aware, intuitive one, has always been there. It's just that your mind, in trying to keep you safe, built layers around it. Layers of performance, layers of productivity, layers of perfectionism. But now those layers are dissolving, and what's emerging is clarity. Clarity about what you value, clarity about what you're no longer available for, clarity about the kind of life you want to build, not for appearances, but for peace. You start designing your life from the inside out. Your choices are no longer dictated by fear of judgment or desire for approval. They're rooted in congruence. Does this align with who I'm becoming? Does this support the life I'm building? Does this reflect the values I now hold sacred? And when the answer is no, you bless and release, not with resentment, but with reverence, because every no to what's not aligned is a yes to deeper integrity. And that integrity, it becomes the spine of your life. You no longer collapse under the weight of others' expectations. You stand in the center of your own. You no longer contort yourself to avoid conflict. You speak truth with compassion and let the chips fall where they may. You no longer chase clarity. You create it through committed action, and in that action, you move not faster, but freer. You stop hustling for peace and start living from it. You stop negotiating your worth and start embodying it. You stop surviving your life and start shaping it. This is when the world begins to feel different, not because the world has changed, but because your inner lens has. You see people's projections for what they are, not reflections of your truth, but revelations of their pain. You see obstacles as opportunities, not to dominate, but to develop. You see time not as a pressure, but as a presence. And presence becomes your home. A home you carry with you into meetings and relationships, into solitude and celebration. A home that cannot be shaken by opinions, setbacks, or praise, because you no longer need the external to validate the internal. You no longer crave applause to know you're aligned. You no longer fear silence. In fact, you seek it, because silence, once terrifying, has become sacred. It is where you meet yourself again and again, where you remember what matters, where you recalibrate your path, and what you'll find, every time you return to this silent edge, is the same truth. You were never lost. You were never late. You were simply learning to listen. And now that you are, truly, deeply, soulfully listening, you are living. Not perfectly, not without fear, but fully. And that fullness, it's enough. Not just for you, but for everyone whose life your presence quietly transforms. Because that's what this whole journey has been about, not perfection, but presence. Not control, but clarity. Not speed, but sustainability. Not success as the world defines it, but significance as your soul desires it. And that kind of significance, it can't be measured, but it can be felt. In every room you walk into, in every moment you stay present, in every time you choose love over fear, truth over comfort, depth over distraction. You are not here to perform. You are here to live, to feel, to love, to lead, to let your presence echo long after your words have faded. And that, my friend, is the power of not reacting. That is the power of the silent edge. Let's return to the very beginning, not to relive the past, but to honor how far you've come. Once, you lived on the surface, reacting, rushing, trying to keep pace with a world that never stops spinning. You measured your value by how much you could do, how much you could fix, how much you could give. You tried to be everything for everyone, but forgot to be something for yourself. And now, you've remembered. You've remembered that you are not a machine. You are a soul, not a checklist. A calling, not a brand. A being. This remembrance changes the way you wake up. It changes the way you breathe. It changes the way you speak, decide, connect, and create. It changes everything, not all at once, but one breath at a time, one moment of presence, one choice to pause, one sacred no in service of a greater yes. You now know that your growth is not measured in milestones, but in the moments you chose presence over panic, boundaries over burnout, stillness over striving. And more than anything, you've learned that this journey is not about becoming someone else, it's about returning to the truth of who you are. Underneath all the noise, that truth has always been there, waiting, watching, whispering. And now, finally, it is leading. You are being led not by fear, but by vision, not by urgency, but by knowing, not by external markers, but by internal resonance. This is the kind of leadership the world is starving for. Not louder voices, but clearer ones. Not tighter control, but deeper trust. Not more perfection, but radical permission to be human, to cry, to rest, to be wrong and grow from it, to change your mind, to protect your peace, to honor your body, to tell the truth even when it trembles, to live as if your life matters, because it does. And here's the paradox: the more you live this way, the more space you create for others to do the same. You become a lighthouse, not by trying to fix anyone, but simply by staying lit. And that light, it doesn't come from effort. It comes from essence, your unshakable core, your quiet wisdom, your open heart. This is what makes you powerful, not your title, not your talents, not your tactics, but your ability to remain present, even in the storm, to remain kind, even when it's hard, to remain soft, even when the world tells you to harden, to remain you, in a culture obsessed with becoming. The real rebellion is remaining rooted, remaining real, remaining available to joy, remaining available to grief, remaining present in both, because life is not meant to be conquered. It's meant to be experienced fully, and that full experience, it requires you to feel not just the easy feelings, the celebration, the love, the laughter, but the grief, the confusion, the sacred ache of not knowing. It is in that ache that wisdom is born, in that ache that the soul stretches, in that ache that you are reminded, you are not here to perform healing. You are here to embody wholeness, and wholeness is not neat. It is not tidy. It is not marketable. It is wild. It is tender. It is raw. It is real. It is the edge that never ends, and the still point that lives within it. So as you leave this page, don't rush to apply what you've read. Let it apply itself to you. Let it stir something in you that no algorithm can predict. Let it dismantle what you thought you needed and build what you never knew was possible. Let it guide you back, not to a strategy, but to a stance of sovereignty, a stance of presence, a stance of soft, unwavering strength. From this stance, everything changes. You stop seeking permission and start offering presence. You stop asking, "Am I enough?" and start declaring, I am here. You stop shrinking and start settling into the vastness that's always lived within you, because you are not the sum of your struggles. You are the sacred space that holds them. You are not your reaction. You are the consciousness that can choose again. You are not your fear. You are the one who knows how to love through it, and in that knowing, you don't just survive, you rise, you lead, you become the kind of person the world doesn't just admire, but is changed by. Not because you shouted louder, but because you stood still. Not because you proved something, but because you remembered something. Something true. Something holy. Something quietly, defiantly yours. This is the silent edge, not a destination, not a method, not a fix, but a way of being that changes everything you touch, not because of what you do, but because of who you are, and who you are. Enough, now, always. After all the pages, all the insights, and all the pauses where your breath caught in the presence of your own truth, you've arrived here, not at an end, but at a beginning veiled as an afterword. Because what comes next isn't about information, it's about integration. This journey wasn't a manual. It was a mirror, and what it reflected, more than anything, was your capacity. Your capacity to feel without drowning, to love without losing yourself, to act without proving, to rest without guilt, to walk through the fire and remember your name in the ashes. That name? It is not what the world gave you. It's what your soul recognizes when all else falls away. You are more than the roles you play, more than the goals you chase, more than the fears you hide or the dreams you haven't dared to speak aloud. You are more because you were made from more. From stardust and storm, from silence and song, from the sacred tension of being both fragile and fierce, soft and unshakable. This is your reminder, you don't need to earn your worth. You already are. You don't need to chase your purpose. It will meet you when you're ready to live from wholeness. You don't need to be perfect to be powerful. You just need to be present. Presence is the gateway. Presence is the healing. Presence is the revolution. In a world where everything is designed to distract, presence is an act of rebellion. To sit with yourself when it's easier to scroll. To feel your feelings when it would be quicker to numb. To look someone in the eye. To speak with honesty. To honor your body when it says no. To rest before you break. These are radical acts, and they matter. They matter more than how many followers you gain or how many tasks you tick off a list. They matter because they shape who you are becoming, not in the eyes of others, but in the depths of your own soul. And if you ever forget, come back to the silence. Not because silence fixes everything, but because it reveals everything. Silence will show you what you're holding that isn't yours. It will show you what hurts still need tending. It will show you where you're outsourcing your self-trust. And it will gently, consistently invite you home, to your own wisdom, to your own rhythm, to your own voice. Let that voice guide you now, not just to do more, but to be more of who you already are. Let that voice interrupt the inner critic, the doubter, the wounded protector who still thinks you need to earn love by being extraordinary. You don't. You are already extraordinary. Not because of what you do, but because of how deeply you're willing to live. And this depth, it changes things. It shifts the energy in rooms. It grounds people in your presence. It creates safety without needing control. It offers compassion without rescuing. It holds without holding back. This is the edge, the real one, not defined by ambition or productivity, but by wholeness. So when you step into your next challenge, your next season, your next opportunity, don't ask, how can I impress? Ask, how can I show up with integrity? Ask, what does alignment require of me now? Ask, What would it look like to live today as if my soul was leading, and then listen, and then act, and then pause, and then begin again? Because living from this place isn't linear, it's cyclical, it's layered, it's rich and messy and unpredictable and sacred, and it will ask everything from you: your honesty, your humility, your courage, your softness, but it will give you everything too: clarity, connection, meaning, peace. So hold this book not as a script, but as a compass. Let it remind you that the answers aren't out there. They never were. They live where they always have, in you. And now, more than ever, you're ready to hear them, to trust them, to live by them, because you are not just capable of doing hard things. You are called to do meaningful things. You are not just meant to survive your story. You are meant to shape it, to own it, to bless it, and to walk it, every sacred step, with eyes wide open, heart full, and soul anchored in truth. This is your edge, not the end of something, but the beginning of everything that matters. Before you close this chapter, pause for one more breath. Let this be the breath that seals everything, not as conclusion, but as continuity. You see, the path of inner work is not something we master. It is something we return to, over and over, gently, imperfectly, with reverence for how far we've come, and tenderness for how far we've yet to go. You may forget this wisdom tomorrow. That's okay. You may fall into old patterns next week. That's okay. You may doubt yourself again, question your progress, or wonder if anything's changed. But something has, because once you've seen who you really are, beneath the noise, beneath the fear, beneath the striving, you can't unsee it. That glimpse changes everything. You begin to recognize when you're abandoning yourself in the name of productivity. You begin to slow down, not out of laziness, but out of devotion. You begin to treat discomfort not as a threat, but as a teacher. And over time, something remarkable happens. You become trustworthy to yourself. Not perfect, but present. Not unshakable, but unafraid to feel the quake. Not always certain, but always committed. And that commitment, it becomes your compass. In relationships, you start choosing connection over performance. In work, you start pursuing purpose over pressure. In life, you begin to define success on your own terms, terms that honor your values, your health, your peace. This shift may go unnoticed by the world, but inside, it's everything. You no longer live to prove. You live to embody. You no longer seek escape. You seek alignment. You no longer perform power. You live it, quietly, tenderly, boldly. This is your new normal, a life built from presence, led by truth, held by love. And if the world ever grows too loud again, too fast, too sharp, you know where to return. Return to silence. Return to center. Return to the edge that made you whole. Return, not to begin again, but to remember, you never left, because now, you carry the silence within you. And that silence, it is no longer something you fear. It is something you follow.